Hi there, this is Luis Silva. I'm your social studies instructor, and today we're going to be looking at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This is a very important topic for world history as well as United States history. And the objectives for this lesson are the following. First, we're defining the Industrial Revolution. Secondly, we are going into the historical significance of the Industrial Revolution. Thirdly, we are going into the reasons as to why the Industrial Revolution started in England. And lastly, we are looking at some of the results of the Industrial Revolution. As we move on through this presentation, I want you to keep in mind this quote: "Necessity is the mother of inventions." Really important quote because everything in this world is about inventions. So let's move on. So what was the Industrial Revolution? A simple definition is the Industrial Revolution was a fundamental change in the way goods were produced from human labor to machines. Please pay attention to this last part. From human labor, in other words, human hands, to being replaced and done with machines. Now, the historical significance of the Industrial Revolution. If you were an ancient Greek or a Roman, you would have been comfortable living in Europe in the 1700s, in particular the beginning of the 1700s, because life was basically the same as when you were alive or hundreds of years back. Now, agriculture and technology had not changed, actually, especially around the early parts of the 1700s, for 2,000 plus years. But this actually changed completely with the Industrial Revolution, as normal way of life did change drastically and dramatically as the Industrial Revolution actually started to take a hold in Great Britain. Now, more was created in the last 250 plus years than in the previous 2,500 years known in human history. So just keep this in mind, as it's very important and relevant to the study of history, U.S. history, world history, and in this case particularly Great Britain history. So let's keep on going with the historical significance of the Industrial Revolution. When the Industrial Revolution started and as it evolved, new energy sources were developed to power new machines. For those energy sources included obviously water, steam, electricity, oil, among other things. This actually increased the use of metals and minerals as well, such as aluminum, coal, copper, and iron. Now, before we go on to the main points of our lesson today, this is a map of Great Britain from around the 1750s to around the 1850s. As you can see, England, Great Britain, was extremely industrialized, and actually it was the most industrialized nation in the world. As you can see, it's surrounded by water, it's surrounded by rivers. Obviously, those rivers were extremely important during the Industrial Revolution. So if you need more information to go over all of this readings here, you can actually pause this video so you can see what everything is referring to. Now, why did the Industrial Revolution begin or start in England? There are 8 main reasons. And by the way, I do want to mention the fact, or reiterate the fact, that the Industrial Revolution started around 1750 in England. And here are the 8 reasons. You're going to look at 4 right now. In the next slide, we're going to look at another 4. The first reason is proximity to water. The second reason is raw materials. The third reason is productive agriculture. The fourth reason is urbanization. The fifth reason is protection of property. The sixth reason is foreign resources. And The last two reasons are accumulation of capital, and lastly, the factory system. These are the 8 main reasons as to why the Industrial Revolution started in England. By the way, there are way more reasons, but these are the 8 that we will be focusing on today. Now, let's move on to the first one, and that is proximity to water. As you know, Great Britain is an island basically, and the islands actually are surrounded in this case, well, by water. And usually when you have islands, you do have different river systems that actually move into the different parts of the island. And in this case, Great Britain basically was surrounded by oceans, in this case the Atlantic Ocean, and that actually gave Great Britain an advantage over many nations, because almost at every corner of the island a boat or a ship could actually park and deliver goods. And on top of that, of being surrounded by the ocean, you had river systems, you had canal systems, which allowed the movement of goods through the river system or the canal systems to the deeper parts of the island. And this allowed the movement of goods that were brought from other parts of the world into the island of Great Britain, as well as it allowed the goods that were produced or manufactured in the inner parts of Great Britain to move outside into the boats waiting that were maybe going to the Americas, Africa, India, the Middle East, the Asian part of the world, and other places. So proximity to water was a fundamental component when it came to Great Britain dominating the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. Another really important component that Great Britain actually had was a couple of things. First of all, it had access to raw materials. This included access to coal. By the way, Great Britain has, even right now, a whole bunch of coal. Coal is basically a mineral that works to fuel and provide energy resources to a nation. And in this case, Great Britain actually had that. It had also access to iron. As you may know, iron is a metal basically that helps to build stuff. In the case of Great Britain, iron helped to like build locomotives out of metal. It also had a whole bunch of train tracks which were built out of iron. Now, iron is not a lasting mineral, but it provides, and it actually gave Great Britain the advantage that many nations did not have. And lastly, we're going to be looking at this later on in more details. Great Britain had access to minerals from and raw materials from other parts of the world, and as you know, those were colonies that Great Britain had actually acquired prior to the Industrial Revolution. Now, a third component that we need to look at, and it really important in the case of Great Britain, and not only Great Britain, many other parts of the world, is productive agriculture. This is important because you need agriculture in order to grow food and sustain a society, sustain people, feed people from different parts of your country. And the first one is component or concept within this particular aspect of Great Britain is crop rotation. And the main role of crop rotation is the Industrial Revolution actually is that it helped restore plant nutrients to the soil, so crops grew better. Actually, crop rotation refers to the growing of a set of different types of crops in the same or in sequential seasons in order to help restore plant nutrients. So it's really important that farmers learn obviously how to grow the different agricultural products in order to first be successful, and secondly be able to feed the hundreds of thousands of people in Great Britain. The other big component is the seed drill, which was an invention, and it enabled farmers to place seeds at the exact right location and depth. This allowed obviously farmers to be more productive and be able to again feed a whole bunch of people. Now, these two components that I just mentioned, productive agriculture, actually provided plenty of food for people to survive. Now, in terms of agriculture, some other information is that the Industrial Revolution brought obviously machines to farms. The use of farm machinery meant that fewer workers were needed, and this obviously led to a displacement of a whole bunch of workers. Now, displaced farm workers moved to cities to find work in factories. This is called rural to urban migration. And obviously, growing populations in urban cities require farmers to grow more crops. And obviously, this allowed farmers to actually make a little bit more money. Now, the science of agriculture, farmers and government actually invested in agricultural research. This led to agriculture establish schools, societies, and experimental stations. So it is really important for us to know that the transformation of agriculture led to the production of more food for people, and with more food, obviously people were better off as they were able to feed their families. They were able to provide a means of food for entire societies. Another important thing that we need to look at for Great Britain is urbanization. And this is really important because the availability of food allow people to move from farms to cities. And in turn, because obviously there was more food, this actually led to more babies. You know, people had more time to do other stuff than work, so this led to more babies. And this, obviously, the end result was an increase in population. And, you know, less people were needed in the agricultural fields. So all of those newborn babies were actually becoming part of the city. And the city was really important, and we're going to look at it in a few, another few slides, is because there was basically work in the cities for people. Now, another important concept that you need to be aware of is the protection of property. In Great Britain, laws were passed that basically protected those people that invested. So entrepreneurs or business people, business person, businesswoman actually took risks. And obviously, those risks, you know, involved investing money. The laws actually allow entrepreneurs to take risk and build businesses without the fear that the government or some other business was going to take away what they had worked for so hard. So in reality, the protection of property enabled entrepreneurs to buy plenty of land. This land included land in the cities, it included lands in the farm fields, and obviously at the end of the day, the entrepreneurs wanted to make money. You know, that's the idea of the Industrial Revolution: get wealthy, generate money for your business. The sixth component or sixth reason why Great Britain became, I would say, the mother of the Industrial Revolution is because of foreign resources. As you may know, and you probably have studied this already, England was a global empire. It had like colonies all over the world, And this allowed England to actually get anything or whatever they wanted from the different colonies they had acquired for their own benefit. And as a result, England had success to raw materials. They could get raw materials from basically anywhere. And the thing is that England would get raw materials. Let's say they needed wood from the Americas, so they would get a whole bunch of wood from the Americas. They would take that wood back to England, to the factories in England, and in England that wood will get transformed to like chairs, tables, and other things. And those chairs, those tables would actually be sold back to those colonies where the wood had been taken from. So Great Britain had a whole bunch of resources. And this is an image, this is a map of Great Britain in 1750, or England. And as you can see, like this pinkish looking color, these are the colonies that Great Britain had. I mean, if you see, they had colonies starting with the 13 colonies in America, in North America. They had Canada. I mean, they had like almost the entire south tip of of Africa, which is now South Africa. And I mean, they had parts in the Middle East. They had parts in India, Australia, in many places. So they had the power actually to get as many things as they wanted from all over these places. Seventh reason why Great Britain was able to be like the mother of the Industrial Revolution is they had a whole bunch of capital. They had a whole bunch of money. And a lot of this money, unfortunately and sadly, was a direct result of the African slave trade. A whole bunch of Englishmen would grab slaves from Africa, and they would sell those slaves to many parts of the world, including like North America, the Caribbean, and South America. So a whole bunch of these wealthy entrepreneurs had gained a whole bunch of their wealth through a cruel method. In this case, we would say the African slave trade. But they were smart. They actually used that money to reinvest during the Industrial Revolution. And, they would reinvest in factories, they would reinvest in purchasing new lands, and among other things. And obviously this, at the end of the day, led to the accumulations of more wealth. So it's really important for you to know that capital became a significant factor that led Great Britain to actually dominate the Industrial Revolution in its beginning stages. And the eighth factor here, basically, that led to Great Britain being a dominant force or the mother of the Industrial Revolution is the factory system. This is really important because basically the factory system was a place where goods for sale are manufactured, but they're not just manufactured like before, where you actually took your time to put something together. If you wanted to build a table, you would like go piece by piece by piece and then put it all together. Well, the manufacturing system, or the factory system, actually led to mass production, producing like hundreds, thousands, and hundreds of thousands of things, and actually selling those things. And you need to know also that the factory system led to the growth of cities, because many cities would actually grow around the factory, because the factory was the main working place for the people that lived in that city. So it became really important for cities to develop or evolve around the factories. Remember, the factory was a place where like literally everything was mass produced, and those things would actually be taken out once done and sold outside to different parts of the world. Now, you have here the domestic system, which is in this image here, which is everything that was actually done at home, how it was done. And then you have the factory system. I'm not going to actually go over everything right here. You can actually pause the video and look at the differences between the domestic system and the factory system, and you're gonna see that the factory system was way more powerful in terms of production than the domestic system. Now, the results of the Industrial Revolution. This is really important also because you had economic changes, you had political changes, and you had social changes as the results. For example, in terms of economic changes, you had the expansion of world trade. You had, obviously, like we talked, factory system, mass production of goods, industrial capitalism, increased standard of living, and unemployment. In terms of political systems or changes, we have the decline of landed aristocracy, the growth and expansion of democracy, increased government involvement in society, increased power industrialized nation, nationalism and imperialism were stimulated, and rise to power of business people. And in terms of social changes, we have the development of growth in cities, we have improved status and earnings power of women, increased leisure time, population increases. Now, some of the problems in terms of society is that economic insecurity was part of the social changes, increased deadlines of war, urban slums, among other things. And lastly, we have science and research stimulated. So please make sure that you go back and review all of this stuff if need be. And lastly, if you want to continue learning about world history, United States history, hey, feel free and subscribe to this channel. We're here to help you. I'm here to provide you with lessons that will ultimately guide you to be a successful student when it comes to social studies. Again, do not forget and subscribe. You have a good one.